Hello. Today we are going to talk about a heavy, difficult, tragic subject. We are going to talk about the attacks of 9/11, September 11th, 2001. That was 20 years ago. Today is the 20th anniversary. So I just wanted to give a quick, sort of recap of it. I really don't have much of a personal story. I did know a whole lot of people who, at the time lived in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Washington D.C. area. I lived in the Boston area at the time. A lot of people in Boston were affected. Fortunately, nobody I knew died, save for one individual whom I knew very briefly. I don't know. I don't believe my perception would have been all that different if somebody I did know did die. I have since met some people who were involved who were very seriously affected, like first responders, but that is even not the crux of what I would like to talk about. A human life is a human life, even if it's somebody you don't know, when basically you have a situation that amounts to about 3,000 counts of murder in the first degree, premeditated murder. That's a very serious situation. And I remember even as I watched the towers being struck by aircraft, I remember these thoughts. Why is it happening? What is happening? Why is there no opposition to this? Why is there no anti-aircraft missiles or fighter jets being deployed? It just looked very wrong. At any rate, after that, for a long time I basically just read the news and tried to make sense of it, and eventually I failed. I basically have gone through all possible combinations of factors, of scenarios that I could think of, and by about the fall of 2004 I ran out of them. I basically could not reconcile what we were told about the event with expectations of human behavior, with what we know about physics, what we know about science, what we know about real world objects. And so ultimately I just realized that what we were told about this event could not have been true. And we can talk about many parts of this equation. For example, 3 skyscrapers fell in New York City. No, not 2, 3. 2 of them were struck by aircraft and 3 of them fell. The third one, the first 2 were WTC-1 and WTC-2. The third one was WTC-7, located about a block away from them, which was marginally impacted by burning debris, and it had minor fires, and it eventually collapsed straight down with an acceleration roughly that of free fall, pretty much straight into its own footprint. Even more so than the collapses of the 2 towers, its collapse was consistent with controlled demolition. That is just one example of the many countless anomalies associated with that event. We have a situation where, neatly enough, the alleged 19 hijackers are all dead, and at least in the US, to the best of my knowledge, nobody has been convicted in the court of law for this crime. Once again, 3,000 counts, almost 3,000 counts of murder one. We are now going to go to an article that I had written in May 2006 and that was over 15 years ago. So let's go take a look at this article. Okay, it is titled 9/11, the impossible, the improbable, the implausible. I basically cover the following: the near free fall speed collapse of WTC-1, WTC-2, WTC-7. The pools of molten steel were discovered underneath the remains of these three skyscrapers. Now, the problem is with that, when you juxtapose it against the official narrative, the problem is that, we were told that basically it was always a result of office fires, like burning, jet fuel and contents of the offices. That does not melt steel. It just doesn't happen. Four airliners successfully hijacked and not intercepted in violation of procedures in place at the time, including one that basically flew for over 40 minutes unmolested by any kind of defense forces. Now, people who flew these airlines were known as rather poor pilots and executed the feats of pilotage that professionals struggle or even outright fail to emulate. Hani Hanjour, the person who allegedly piloted American Airlines 77, the jet that hit the Pentagon, by some miraculous coincidence, happened to strike the least populated section of the building, and out of all the options that he had, he chose the one that was safest basically for the occupants of that building. A number of them still died, but a lot more probably would have died if he had chosen a different section. Now, also there were war games happening on the same on the same day, and there were disaster preparedness exercises. Some of them emulated what actually did happen. Another thing is, for example, there's a few more oddities. These ones I filed under implausible, which is something that could have happened, but makes little sense, like the fact that Al-Qaeda never claimed responsibility, the fact that the administration basically opposed any kind of real investigation until there was public pressure to investigate, and a 9/11 commission was formed, and it basically produced a report that was completely full of holes. So this is basically what we have. And after that, as you know, we have a complete new huge department named Department of Homeland Security that came into being in the US. We have these laws that basically take us closer to like a surveillance/security state. And we also had two wars. One of them concluded rather disastrously just recently, the one in Afghanistan, the one in Iraq basically concluded earlier, never mind miscellaneous other military operations. And it just seemed very strange because these wars were basically presented as a war on terror. We are fighting people who, attacked us on 9/11, which, kind of makes sense, except why are you attacking them, attacking some groups in Afghanistan, while if your concern is Islamic extremism, don't you think that maybe it would make more sense to say become energy independent and not import Saudi oil, which brings massive wealth to a regime that oftentimes is very supportive of these extremist groups and finances various extreme mosques all over the world. That's just one example. I mean, it just, is not consistent, but it is definitely consistent with various globalist and rather totalitarian ideas, such as the idea of a surveillance network, or the idea of security services like the state of permanent emergency. And we should now, all of that came into being after 9/11 to some degree. We should now look at that in context of what we are dealing with right now. For example, let me see. For example, if we look at the measures being proposed under, as a response to COVID now, they are along the same lines and sometimes even far more intrusive. Like the idea that you have apps that would be used to track people and that you would have the government basically dictating businesses which businesses can and cannot operate, and the justification of some idea to some degree was the same, the common good, etc., etc. So I think, first off, I think we should understand that the amount of lies that we are subjected to is really tremendous. We basically live in a multi-layered matrix of lies, and so in light of that, I think it's very important to first off, to remember those who died that day, to remember all the destruction, and to remember that it was brought about by lies. There are lies that that were based upon it were used to generate more violence, and that the only way we in the world can stop it, and now we have the real capability thanks to our modern technologies, is to push back, to relentlessly push back against these lies, because lies translate to violence, and violence is perpetrated. Perpetuated. Violence is maintained by way of lies and deception. So, this is it. May those who died that day rest in peace, and may we never forget in the truest sense. May we never forget what it was about, and never stop pushing back.